Like most people, my humble start in life begins with the fact that I was born. I had company, however, an identical twin sister and built-in best friend who followed close behind. We were poor, welfare kids, raised by a single parent who moved us around a lot as problems seemed more easily fixed by relocation. In 2 years alone, my sister and I went to 8 different schools. There were times when things were really tight. I can remember only a jar of peanut butter one time in the cupboard with nary a cracker to put it on. And a cross-country road trip in a 55 Buick for which my mom paid $55. She discovered that you definitely get what you pay for. Many times the generosity of strangers kept us fed and a roof over our heads. There is still a touch of irony in this for me, that many of those who looked out for our family, fundamentalist Christians, are today the ones who struggle so deeply with my existence as a transgender person. While there was a lot of unpredictability to my life, I was expected to excel in school. My mom always encouraged me to think outside the box, to aim high, and not let gender stereotypes prevent me from pursuing my dreams. I don't think she expected me to take that advice so literally. I understood that good grades were a ticket to a different and better life. She pointed out to me that some of the realities of our family's experience, poverty, divorce, raised by a single parent who herself had been raised in an alcoholic household, were all variables that made it statistically likely that I would be a problem child. At that time, neither one of us realized that this statistical likelihood had simply not yet arrived. The distress I experienced with respect to my gender is a longer story than I'm able to share with you today. What I will say is that it is difficult, even now, to find the words to describe the physical changes that came with puberty and how that impacted me. At 11, all I knew is that it was wrong, like a body betrayal, and that there was no one I could talk to and no one that would understand, not even my twin sister, not my mom, and certainly not anyone at church. I'd never even heard the word transgender. Like many in life, I had an interesting belief that life should be fair, or at least that it could be, and that most people wanted it to be. I joined 2 girls on my basketball team and sued our school for equal funding under Title IX. The boys' basketball coach told me how much he admired my courage. I said, "Well, I'm glad that you agree." And he said, "I didn't say I agreed." I took his words as a win anyway. And when we did, this was the first time I realized how powerful it could be to take a stand, and how strange it was that not everyone would embrace a shared sense of fairness. However, my top grades, my faith community, good friends, a sense of belonging, and this social justice win were not enough to prevent me from falling down, and falling down hard. The internal distress I felt physically, coupled with a growing awareness of attraction towards women, meant that I was never going to fit on that straight and narrow pathway expected by everyone. I felt like I'd been holding my breath for much of my life. Nothing relieved that except diving headfirst into drugs and alcohol. And I dove hard. I tried to go to college, but Seattle Pacific University did not take kindly to a young, newly out dyke whose next party was more important than the next chapel service. I dropped out, or was kicked out, or maybe a bit of both. The next few years were a blur, and I was losing both friends and jobs. I gave myself a little come to Jesus talk to take a look directly at my life. As I stepped out of my destruction, I found a place for myself within the butch femme community. Here were a lot of dykes who embraced and celebrated masculinity, something I'd never found before. Many were much older, and I felt enveloped and loved, a sort of a second upbringing. The age difference was a godsend. It put my experiences in perspective. Yes, life had been challenging thus far, but I had more freedom and safety because they had weathered even harder times. Their mentoring gave me a sense of my own place within a historical movement, and I was deeply grateful. I met a woman, fell in love. Our decision to have a baby lasted all of 10 minutes. She said, "I want to have a baby." I said, "Great, me too." She said, "I want to give birth." I said, "Great. I want you to." We were one of the first same-sex couples to adopt in Washington State, another social justice win. While the relationship did not last, my desire and commitment to parent our daughter did. Co-parenting was challenging, but my legal status as her parent made all the difference. At the same time, I was beginning to understand that the distress I'd felt about my body had a name. I was transgender. But how do I address the internal physical distress of my body, knowing that the external volatility within my lesbian community? I found that the acceptance and celebration of my masculinity extended only so far, and beginning a gender transition was dangerous territory. At what point would I cross that strangely indefinable line between the gender of a woman to that of a man? At what point would I find myself without friends and community? I had listened to the nascent opinions within my community about just how one should define woman. The inclusion of trans people was a hotly debated topic that went round and round and seemed to change, often depending on which transgender person was being discussed. There was never consensus, only a constantly shifting majority opinion. The price tag of my gender transition turned out to be high. Friends became increasingly distant. A community whose foundation was predicated on women being with women struggled to know just what to do with me. I wanted to stay. But how does someone who looks like this find a justifiable place within community? As I was grappling with this, my ex pulled out all the stops as she tried to rip my child out of my life. Wanting any reason to be rid of me, she had no problem painting me as some type of deviant because of the gender transition I'd only tentatively started. I was dependent on a legal system that was oblivious with respect to transgender parents. It would be a dark, painful year where I lost all contact with my daughter before I was able to regain full parental rights. A painful and I consider this a painful blessing when compared to so many other trans people whose gender transition meant the complete loss of their children. My efforts to stay within community caused an even bigger transition than gender, and that was one of a position of controversy. The community love and acceptance that I'd known for so long was now deeply threatened. I dug in. I challenged myself and others to examine what it meant to live within a community defined and based on labeling desire, women with women, men with men. But these same women still wanted to sleep with me. The only difference was that they just didn't want other people to know. This was not just the lesbian community. Gay men became quite attentive. Surprise. But my gender history hit them with a combination of confused desire and sometimes barely disguised disgust. I became more active in manifesting conversations within gay and lesbian community. These conversations were intense, controversial, with some people grateful and desperate to have them, while others wished I would and worked hard to make me simply go away. I could have, but where would I go? The straight world had already rejected me. Fighting to stay in queer community seemed better than being lost to an unknown oblivion. I didn't understand that leadership came with what I was doing. The events and discussions grew larger and larger crowds. I wasn't ready for the volatility I was stepping into. It came at me hard and ugly. People I'd never met vilified me because of what my activism was and what it wasn't. For some, it was unsettling, distressing, enraging, violating, confusing, and divisive. For others, it was too narrow, too white, too male, too female, too fledgling, too little, and too much. I was labeled misogynistic, racist. The attacks were significant and scary. I had become a visible, yes, I'd become a visible and present embodiment of the white heterosexual patriarchy, the ultimate oppressor. And I was being crushed under that rage. The loss of my daughter, my friends, my place in community had left me with no support system. All I knew was that I needed to get out. Getting back to school seemed like a way to do that. It had been over 15 years since I squeezed out my few credits at Seattle Pacific, but Antioch had a way of supporting adult learners like myself. So I put it out there, what was left of me anyway. In my application essay, I told Antioch about my life's journey and the leadership work I was currently doing. They said they'd be delighted to accept me into their BA program. Thank you, Antioch. While activism and leadership were a big part of my program at Antioch, I told my advisor that I wanted to be immediately employable and financially stable. There was no room for activism in my future. I imagined stepping into a business career and leaving leadership behind, and I felt like my life depended on it. I applied for a GSBA scholarship. I shared some of my journey with them. I didn't tell them how depleted I was and that I just wanted out. I saw them as a nice group of people who were the same gay and lesbian community that had so readily vilified me. I felt dread and fear when someone on the interview team delved into terrain that resembled the attacks I'd been experiencing. I immediately pushed back. I'm sure my anger was obvious. It was all I could do to stay in that room. Great, I thought, blew that interview. But no, to my shock, I was given the maximum scholarship amount. Thank you. Not just then, the next year as well. The GSBA members on those interview teams really showed up. They were with me through the anger and the confusion and grief. We laughed and we cried in those rooms. They let me know that they represented a far greater body of people who cared about the work I was doing. It wasn't just the half dozen of them in that room. They wanted me to know that they were responsible for thousands of donors who wanted to make the world a better place for all of us. These were GSBA members who may not fully comprehend the intricacies of my work, but who definitely understood the historical power of it, and understood it much better than I did. To them, it was worthy of celebration. My advisor at Antioch also subtly, lovingly ignored my plea to guide me away from activism. She, like the GSBA, held a mirror up to my work so I could see what she saw. You have all helped me find my way back to myself. I had been in the process of shutting down. I was falling into bitterness and numbness. While some of the gay and lesbian community has caused me the deepest hurt and the most dangerous betrayal, others, like you, were showing up. You have helped illuminate the way out and have assisted me with my healing. Standing here today will come to you as no surprise that my work is still in leadership and activism. Despite my own best efforts. My organization supports thousands of families with transgender children. I've led hundreds of trainings in schools and other child-based organizations. This work is taking me to red states like Alaska, Michigan, and North Dakota. My audience is primarily heterosexual people. Seeing my work through your eyes and this program has kept me from dying, both figuratively and literally. Because of you, I have made a conscious choice to rediscover my innocence and trust, and to even reclaim values like love and compassion, forgiveness that were such an integral part of my Christian upbringing. I bring those reclaimed attributes to my work with those heterosexual parents who find themselves traveling life with a transgender child. Parents who are Republicans, Mormons, Texans at table 47, they're Christians, they're rednecks. I hold a mirror up to them just as you have with me, to show them how beautiful and precious their children are and that they have a task in front of them that includes love and acceptance. If you ever wonder whether the investment in us as scholars makes any difference, I invite you to recognize the many, many lives of children you have saved because this program kept me from closing a door. The mirror you held up so I could see the impact of my work has helped me to see that this work is a matter of personal destiny, nothing less. And lastly, you saved my life, and I'm deeply grateful.